Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha Gurureva Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trilokyam Sacharacharam Tat Padam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tvameva Mata Ch.15 Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vedyadravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Jai Guru Yatha Sarvani Bhutani Pratibhanti Stitani Cha Yatraibo Bhashamam Yanti Tasmai Satyatmane Namaha. So we are in the story of Uddalaka, and Vasistha walked us through the 8 limbs of Raja Yoga. Uddalaka was of middling intellect, so he had to do these 8 limbs to help purify the body, mind, and intellect before he could reach samadhi. So can someone tell us where we are tonight in the text?
It's shloka number 41 on page 156.
Okay, who would like to chant tonight?
I can chant, Jim.
Thank you.
Was it 37, 30?
41 on page 156.
41. Okay. Jivan mukta padam tattu yatsa sampraptavan vandvijaha uddala kotra panmasan durot sarita siddhibhuhu kadachit ahnamasena kadachit vatsarena cha kadachit vatsaraudhena dhyana sakto vyabudhyayat. That indeed was the stage of liberation while living, which that Brahmana reached. Here, Uddalaka remained for 6 months with his abode of perfection kept aside. Then, absorbed in meditation, sometime he woke up in a day, sometime in a year, and at another time after a multitude of years.
So he's obviously fond of samadhi. So again, this is allegorical, but his mind drifts inward into samadhi. Sometimes he's there for short periods, sometimes for long periods. Next verse.
Chittatvaika ghanabhyasat mahachitvam upetya saha chitsamanya chirabhasat satta samanya mayayao. By the firm or uninterrupted practice of the one conscious principle, Having reached the state of the great consciousness or the absolute or undivided consciousness, he arrived at identity with pure existence by the practice of identity with pure consciousness for a long time.
Yes. So here there's an echo of what Shankara says in Shloka 267 of Viveka Chudamani. Even after realization of the truth, there exists a strong impression that one is the doer and the enjoyer, which is the cause for rebirth. Here, what that really means is we re-identify. It needs to be conscientiously rooted out through steady and continuous identification with the self. This deep, deep introversion of the mind. And Shankara goes on to say, the annihilation of the vasanas here and now is considered liberation by the wise. Or what Shankara says in his qualifications of a fit teacher, who's a full knower of the Supreme, who has retired into the Supreme. So Udalaka, over time, through his practice of samadhi, all the attachments, all the identifications, go, let go, let go, till the mind no longer extroverts. Let's see what happens next.
A new section, section 4, Paravrishranti, the supreme repose. Sri Rama Vacha, Satta Samanyamityuktam, Kidrisham Kena Vabhavet. Sri Rama said, of what nature is the identity with pure being or existence that was spoken of by you, and by what means is...
So here Ram is asking Vasistha, what do you mean by this? What are the marks of a person who has this complete identification with consciousness? How will I know it when I get there? Let's see what the answer is.
Vasistha Uvacha, Yada Sakshiyate Chittam, Abhavatyanta Bhavanat, Chitsamanya Swarupasya, Satta Samanya Tatada. Vasistha said, when the thinking mind is completely destroyed on account of the perpetual or perfect contemplation of non-existence, or the conscious base of the mind devoid of thoughts, then there comes the identity with pure being to the mind, which has become identical with pure consciousness.
So this is a very subtle verse. So it's not so much that we achieve a state of thoughtlessness. Yoga Vasistha defines the mind as rooted in three ideas. I think I'm a person, there's some goal, and I need to move toward it. So when that whole paradigm is let go, and then when the yogi penetrates into the unreality not only of the world, but of the mind itself. You can't think a real thought. No thought is real, including the one I just gave you. Then the mind, as it were, becomes stupefied. when you don't believe the mind itself, then it quits extroverting. Now, listen carefully. You might be able to say, I have a thought, I have a feeling, I have a perception. But you can't say, I have awareness. That's an illusion. You are awareness. So if we disregard, unbelief, detach from all known things, what remains is that ground of being, that Ch.15, space of consciousness alone. Any thoughts on this? Next one.
Yada sarvam idam chetyam sabahya bhantaratmakam upalapya vase cheta satta samanyata tada. When the thinking mind could exist having disowned all this to be cognized, made up of the external and the internal world, then there is this state of identity with pure being.
Read the first part again. Your voice for me broke up just a bit.
When the thinking mind could exist having disowned all this to be cognized, made up of the external and internal world.
So the idea is when the thinking mind disowns all that is cognizable, let it go, let it go, let it go. What I call unknowing. Then what remains, again, is this ground of being. Chidananda Rupaham. I am of the form of bliss consciousness. Next one.
Vyutithasya bhavyat yesha samadhistasya janagha enam alamba padiva samasta bhayanashinim uddal ko vasat loke yav vachitam yatha sukham. Sinless one. This state of identity with pure being happens to one who has risen in or completed the path of meditation and abides in the state of absorption in absolute consciousness or samadhi. Having won this position which destroys all fear, Uddalaka lived in this world as long as desired and at pleasure.
So again, samadhi has this value when all perturbations of the mind, vimarsha, vritti, sankalpa, ceases. The individuality ceases to be, and the phenomenal world is not perceived. Yet something remains, this ground of being. Then when the mind returns, it's absolutely conditioned by this. And it no longer attempts to throw up a personal sense of self. You're not a person anymore. You see, you never really were. without effort, without a practice. The continuous knowledge, I am Brahman, is direct experience. Then, as far as the equipment is concerned, let it do as it will. Next one.
अथ काले महता बुद्धितस्य बभूवः विदेह मुक्ततिष्ठामि देहं त्यक्ते vate nischala. Then, after a long time, the firm intention arose in him thus: having abandoned the body, I shall be liberated without the body.
So what he's implying here is that many exits have what we call a conscious exit from the body. It's not like they go into a coma and they're comatose and, then they die. These great Mahatmas deliberately know, okay, the prarabdha is gone. Now I leave.
Talking like out of body experience, is that what you mean, or something?
No,
Sorry.
the body drops. You have a conscious death. Now, let me nuance this. Swamiji was under general anesthetic for heart surgery when he died. In the end, it's no big deal what state your body or mind is when you die. You prepare all this by the way you live. But many traditions, including yoga, say that if you can be conscious when death comes, it's a benefit. I wouldn't worry about it. I think all that again is prarabdha. Your karma will determine that. But for the sake of the story, Uddalaka has this conscious, the term we use is mahasamadhi. Maha means great, the last final exit. You may have heard me tell the story when Swami Tapovanam, Chinmaya's teacher, he actually had dysentery. And all his students says, oh, Swamiji, why don't you come down to Delhi and get treated? And Tapovanam's answer was, what? People don't die in Delhi? And then they said, oh, please, please, we want you to stay alive. We love you. And his response was, you say you love me? When soon I will be eternally united with my beloved. And you want me to stay in this packet of sorrows? And you say you love me? Very different view of being in the body and letting it go. Most of us are terrified of death and hang on to for dear life, literally. But one of the marks of the man or woman of wisdom is this fear of death is gone. All right, next one.
Tata padmasanasina chardhon mili talochanah sanyamya gudasanrodhat dwarini navachetasah sanruddha pranapavana bhavita swatma chidghanah angachit samvidabhyasat chit samanya upadade. Then, seated in the yogic pose of Padmasana with his eyes half opened, having controlled the 9 openings of sense through the complete binding of the anal aperture, with the movement of the vital airs stopped, and with deep consciousness constituting his own self meditated upon, he acquired identity with pure consciousness by the practice of delving into the consciousness at the base of divisions or portions of thought. Note, the verse describes the yogic process of transcending thought and getting established in one's own real nature, pure being consciousness. The 9 openings are the gates through which the sense impressions are carried to the mind. They are 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, mouth, the organ of generation, and the organ of excretion. The anal lock of Hatha Yoga, breath control, and meditation are referred to here.
So these are all the various bandhas that the Hatha Yogi, the Raja Yogi practices in order to bring the mind into a state of complete quiescence. Going on.
Tadbhyasat avapantah ananda pandamuktatam tada swadano to lina chit samanya dashakramam vishwabharam anantatma satta samanya ayayao. Consequent on that practice, he obtained in himself the greatest throb of bliss. Due to the tasting of that bliss, he arrived at identity with pure being, which had dissolved the course of the state of identity with pure consciousness, and which is of the nature of the eternal spirit and all-pervading.
So, this throb of bliss. So, when the mind ceases all its extroversions and is totally united in the self, when the waves completely still into the ocean, here in Samadhi is that throb of bliss. Now, I'm not sure where he's going to go with this. It's been a while since I've read the story. When he was talking about liberation beyond the body, there may be a second way to interpret this. For those of us who are body identified, we look at the Mahatma and say, oh, he's Jivan Mukta, he's liberated while alive. But the man or woman of knowledge is Videha Moksha. They are liberated beyond the body because the self is always beyond the body. So I'm not sure which interpretation of Videha Moksha he's working at here. Whether he means the liberation that occurs after death, or he's talking about identity with the self. Let's go on and see.
Tasthau samashama bhoga param rishranti magatah upashanta shanai esha swapadev vimalatmani sarvopadhi vinirmukto brahmarupo babhuvasah. He remained entirely as the expanse or fullness of calm, having attained supreme repose. Slowly, this Uddalaka calmed in his own abode which is the pure self, became of the nature of Brahman, or the Supreme Spirit, freed from all attributes or limitations like time, space, etc. This is the last verse.
So he then, in this deep experience of samadhi, he has that deep experience, aham brahmasmi, I am that partless Brahman. Now the last verse in this section.
That was the last verse, Jim. And then this.
Okay. So I think I was mistaken. I think the reference to videha moksha meant, in fact, complete detachment from body identification here. All right, let's going on. Next, another chapter, another section.
Next chapter. Should I read the ending verse of this chapter? It says, "It Shri Vasistha Sangrahe Uddalakopakyanam Panchadasha Sargaha." Thus ends the 15th chapter titled "The Story of Uddalaka" in the abridgment of Yoga Vasistha.
All right, going on.
Shodashaha Sargaha, chapter 16. Surghupakyanam, the story of Suraghu. Section 1, Anta Shitalata, coolness within.
Yes.
Sri Rama Vacha, Kashchidhi Drishyate Loke, Kramat Jata Samadhikaha, Prabuddha Iva Vrishranto, Vyavahara Paropi San, Kashchit Ekantamashritya, Samadhi Niyamasthitaha, Tayostu Katara Shreyan iti me Bhagavan Vada. Sri Rama said, "Someone, or scarcely one, indeed is seen in this world, in whom absorption in absolute consciousness or samadhi has arisen in regular course, who, though remaining wholly engaged in work, is reposed or tranquil, like an awakened or wise one. Someone having resorted to solitude is steadfast in the observance of samadhi or absorption in absolute consciousness. Revered sage, tell me who of the two is better or superior?"
All right, so is it the one who's absorbed in samadhi all the time? Or is it the one who, again, is active in the world, yet completely identified with the self? So that first we call nirvikalpa samadhi. And in Viveka Chudamani, Shankara very definitely suggests that we practice nirvikalpa. Actually, you can't practice nirvikalpa. You can only practice savikalpa samadhi, which is this tuning up of the mind, this deep introversion, let go, let go, let go. Then, when all the attachments have been let go, the mind slips into nirvikalpa. This second condition that the scripture is going to talk about is what we call sahaja samadhi, natural or continuous samadhi, which is the same as knowledge. So I was talking with a friend on the phone this past week about when we were hanging with Swamiji, especially up at Krishnalaya. We were so lucky because there'd only be a couple hundred of us, and we'd be sitting out for satsang on the lawn, and there may be 20 of us. And no matter what he was saying, what he was doing, if you just tuned into him, Shunya Chitta, he was so empty. Always. even though active in the world. Going on.
Vasistha uvacha imam guna samaharam anatma vena pashyatah anta shitala yasao samadhi iti kathyate. To one who's seeing this aggregate of ingredients constituting nature as non-self, or as mere appearances in the self, which is pure consciousness being, that inner coolness or tranquility which manifests is declared as samadhi.
So here he redefines samadhi, not just this deep state of being interior with no thought, but here he says that no engagement or attachment with the world, or seeing the world just as an appearance, and inside has Anta-shitalata, interior coolness. This is said to be the best samadhi. Any thoughts on this? Going on.
Drishyai mama na sambandha iti nishchitya shitalah vyavaharisthita kanchita kaschit dhyana vavasthitah dvavetau sukhinau rama yadhyanta parishitalau dvavetau susamau nunam asandeha padam gatau. There is no connection for me with visible objects. End quote. Thus, having concluded and remaining cool or tranquil, someone is established in work, someone else is settled in meditation. Rama, both these are happy if they are very cool or tranquil within. Certainly, both these are perfectly equal and have arrived at the abode where there is no doubt.
So only you can decide your own state on the inside. Some yogis are fond of meditation, fond of samadhi. Others have this shitalata, this anta-shitalata, this inner coolness, or shunya chitta, the term I like. This emptiness of mind, while they're functioning in the world. And here the scripture says, both are equal. Any thoughts on this? Now, practically speaking, your own prarabdha will determine this. You may find yourself fond of meditation. And it's a delight to spend hours of the day in meditation. Others of us, we're active in the world. It's an inside job. Going on.
Kartri kurvadvaptvetat cheta pratno vasanam durangatam mana jantuhu katha sanshravane yatha. This mind with extremely thin impressions is a non-doer, though doing, just as a man with his mind gone far away does not register in hearing a story.
Yes. So for the man or woman of wisdom, even if they're engaged in the world, From the outside, it looks like they're engaged and concerned like anyone else. But inside, cool. Just like when someone is going blah, 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 and you're absorbed and engaged elsewhere. Oh God, what did they say? Or for me, I find I have this ritual. I wash my hair, then I soap my body, and then I put the conditioner on. And many a time I get ready to put the conditioner on and I go, I have absolutely no memory of having soaked up my body. I know I did, but my mind was gone, even though I was engaged in an action. And that just may be old age, but it may be yoga, who knows? Next one.
Arkud vadapi katraiva cheta praghana nishpandagam api swapne shwabhram pata sthitaviva. The mind with extremely dense impressions is only a doer, though not doing, just as in the situation of a fall into a hole in a dream, even when the limbs are without movement.
Yes. So the mind, if it has deep impressions, it appears as the doer, even though it's not. Just like you're lying in bed and you're dreaming that you're running hither and thither, climbing up a mountain, but your body is still in the bed. So also, the truth is, you do nothing ever. You are still immovable, achalam. Even though the body is wriggling about and the mouth is going flat, 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 flat. The empty inside. Next one.
Yasvatmara tirevanta kurvan karmendriyai kriyaha navasho harshashokabhyam sa samahit ta uchyate. He is called composed or calm who delights in the self within and performing works with the organs of action is not subject to or influenced by joy and sorrow.
Yes. So because the yogi has this trick of abidance in the self, he has access to a joy that's independent of the world. So you hear me use the term, the world becomes trinkets and baubles. To the person in ignorance, the world is serious business. All upset about this, and I get all cravey about that. But for the yogi, it's a light show. It's a movie. All the stuff, it's just trinkets and baubles. there's going to be an immersive King Tut exhibit coming to San Francisco. I was talking with my stepsister a couple weeks ago, and she's a big Egyptian fan. And I said, well, you want to come up and see it? She said, oh, no. You know, I remember when they brought the real stuff through Los Angeles. You got to actually see the real artifacts. I don't want to see a bunch of projections on a wall. So also the yogi. This whole universe is like projections on a wall. Pretty to look at. Interesting. But yourself is real. Taste and see the goodness of the Lord, as the Hebrew psalmist says. Now, there's one of the laws of the mind that's implied here. I call it the ruthless rule of the mind. The mind will return to the experience that's given it the greatest joy. And if your samadhi is tenuous or fragile, it's hard to tune up and revel in the self. Your mind's going to extrovert into the world because it wants joy. This is why practice of samadhi, practice of this deep introversion is so important. Now, after you've attained that, then don't be attached to it. But you can't renounce something you haven't got. And the value of samadhi is that it pulls the mind out of the world. Because you've got a richer playground. Next one.
Atmavat sarva bhutani paradravyani loshtavat swabhavadeva no bhitya ya pashyati sa pashyati. He perceives rightly who looks upon all beings as himself and the possessions of others as a lump of earth, merely on account of inherent nature and not out of fear.
Yes. So the man of wisdom, the person of wisdom has this incredible connectedness with all of life everywhere. And what the world sees as treasures is no different than a lump of earth. All that acquisitiveness and possessiveness. Does that mean he or she doesn't enjoy beauty? Of course he does. But no attachment. I like to compare it to going to the museum. You go to the museum, you can see a painting by a great master or a beautiful statue and appreciate it. And then walk away with no desire to possess it. Next verse.
Section 2. Mandavya, the teaching of Mandavya. Atraivo daharantimam vrittantam suragho kila suragho nama balavan kirataste shobhavatpura. In this very matter, they narrate the story, as they say, of Suragho. In former times, there was a powerful king of the Kiratas, a hunting tribe, by name Suragho.
Going on.
Sachakre Rajakaryani Nigrahanugraha Kramaihi Tajjabhyam Sukhadukhabhyam Tasya Dolayatam Manaha. He performed the duties of the administration of the kingdom by methods of punishments and rewards. His mind swung to and fro or became restless by the pleasure and pain caused by that administration.
So he's a politician. And like every politician, he has his allotted dose of success and failures. And he has elation when his policies work. And he's dejected when the other party gains power. Going on.
Athai kada saprapacha mandavyam munimagatam sampuja vidhivat bhaktya sandeham chidi me prabho nigrahanugrahai jata madbhrita vapushu sthitaha kashanti mam alam chinta samato deti me katham. Then once he asked sage Mandavya, who had come there after having honored him with devotion in due form, open quote, Master, remove this doubt of mine. Anxiety is caused by punishments and rewards which have risen on the person of my subjects, rub or injure me greatly. How shall equanimity rise in me? End quote.
So he has a problem. When he rewards people, he likes it. When he has to punish wrongdoers, it grieves him. He's a sensitive fellow. So he asks the sage Mandavya, how can he gain some equanimity? Let's see what he says.
Mandavya vacha swavicharanya yaivashu shamyanta manojvaraha koham katham idam kimva katham marana janmani vicharyaivam parignyavta swabhavasya sata tava manaswaswarupa muttasrijya shamam eshyati vijvaram. Only by your own investigation, the fever or anxiety of the mind within is extinguished quickly. Who am I? How is this world? How is this world born? What possibly is this existence? How do death and birth happen? To you, of the nature of being, who have well understood your inherent nature, having reflected thus, the mind will attain to tranquility free from fever or anxiety, having given up its natural character.
So the answer is not anything to do with the circumstances of the world. Who am I? What is my essential nature? What is the nature of this world? What is birth and death? What were the other questions that he had? There was one more in the middle that I forgot.
What possibly is this existence?
Yes, what is this existence? So again, in large, Yoga Vasistha deals with three questions. Who am I? What is this world? And how has it come about? Over and over again, we get stories that indicate the answers to that. So here, the solution to life is vichara, investigation. Each of us must do it ourselves. There's the romance of Guru Kripa, the grace of the Guru. Oh, I don't have to do a thing. He's going to hit me with a peacock feather and then it'll all be fixed. Each of us must do the work ourselves. And in the quiescence of our own meditation, reflect on these things, examine the world in the light of what the scriptures teach us. See what we come up with. Going on.
Yavat sarvam na san satyaktam tavat atma na labhyate atma valokanatham hi tasmat sarvam parijyate. So long as everything is not completely renounced, the self is not obtained or perceived. Therefore, for the sake of perceiving or realizing the self alone, let one give up everything.
Yes. So in the first chapter of Yoga Sutra, Patanjali sums up the whole practice. Abhyasa vairagyacha. Deep practice and intense renunciation, intense detachment. Let's review Shankara's definition of vairagya. That desire, we don't achieve it overnight, to give up all attachments to enjoyments gained through the senses, and the renunciation of any notion of self, starting with the body, up to including the form of Brahma, the creator, meaning I'm powerful. All of that has to go. Absolutely. And then these enjoyments, it means also the renunciation of all our thoughts and feelings. I quit believing the mind itself. This is the precondition to steady wisdom. This isn't the only scripture that says it. Any thoughts on this? Now, I had an interesting conversation with a student several months ago, and they were out there in the world and drinking on Friday nights and doing ecstasy and having hookups and all this sort of stuff. And they had been reading a lot of Tantra. And they were saying, I thought in Tantra you could have your cake and eat it too. And what I said to them is that, well, you have to understand what is the end result of this way of life. You get kicked in the teeth enough that in the end you renounce. Jnana yoga, we do it through insight. I don't need to go down those rabbit holes. I understand the process. So Tantra is the more painful path. Oh, this will be fun. Knock yourself out. Those of us who are familiar with the works of Dante Alighieri, the Italian poet, his great work, Paradise Lost. The third section is called Inferno. And the protagonist, Dante, is there on the shores of the river Styx. You cross over the river Styx to get into hell. And the souls of the damned are lined up on the river waiting for the boat ride. And they are gleeful and eager, and they can't wait to get into hell. That's you and me. That's you and me. What's the way out? Vicharena, by means of investigation. The hard way, knock yourself out, go for the world. And as you suffer, think, how's that working out?
Isn't that what we all do either way, though? I don't know. Isn't there things that led us to this? It just
Pardon
seems like
me?
we're all. Isn't there things that led us to Jnana Yoga? I mean, isn't it the pain of our experience? So isn't it all basically?
Let me use an example
Sorry.
from the program. No, it's a good question. So if you look in the big book, at the end of the book, you have the stories. And the first section are stories from the original Alkies back in 1939, all of whom were very low bottom drunks. Then the second section of stories is titled, They Stopped in Time. Do you remember that? What's the difference?
Yes, I do. Sorry, I had it back on mute. My apologies.
What's the difference in those sections?
I guess this is severity of the consequences, is what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. Meaning, those that stopped in time, many of them were young people who were barely potential alcoholics. But having understood the syndrome of alcoholism, they were able to stop while they still had jobs, while they still had their health, while they still had 2 cars in the garage, while they still had a partner. They didn't have to end up a gutter drunk. So that's the difference between the Tantra and the Jnana.
Okay.
Is that making sense, Justin?
It does. Thank you. My apologies. Thank you.
No thing to apologize. It's a good question. It's a very good question. All right. Next verse.
Evam muktva munau yate raja swayam achintayat deham atram aham nasmi hasta pada chetanam kramendriyani naivaham nacha kramendriyani me jadanya tattva swarupani nacha buddhindriya yarnyaham. Having said thus, when the sage was gone, the king reflected within himself, I am not the mere body which consists of hand, feet, and the like, and is insentient. I am not also the organs of action, mouth, hands, legs, and the generative and excretory organs, nor do the organs of action belong to me, who am of the nature of being consciousness. I am not also the organs of perception, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin, which are insentient.
Your voice cut out.
Oh, for which should I read the whole thing again?
No, I think
you've been cutting out quite often. It seems like when he's reading. Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, yeah.
I'm sorry. Can you guys hear? We're getting booms in my neighborhood. Is it distracting to you?
No, it's fine.
No, not to me.
What's distracting?
There's a lot of firecrackers right next to where I am, so maybe that's causing the audio issues.
Yeah.
Good day.
Why don't we quit a little bit early? Because he's starting on the actual practice of subject-object discrimination. We'll repeat that shloka next week. All right, we'll quit here for tonight then. Om
So we're on 17.
Pardon me?
Yes.
17. Okay, my apologies. Thank you.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om. That's it. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. Good night.